Hey there, it's Jared from Authentic Soundware, and I'm here with a quick tutorial about how to create natural feeling tempo maps in your DAW or sequencer. This was a request from a couple people after my last video about the vintage orchestra breakdown. So yeah, I mean, there's really no more dead giveaway that a track was not recorded live than that feel of the music being glued to a strict tempo grid. But of course, it's so much easier to work in a DAW when everything is on the grid, right? I'm definitely guilty of that. However, if you're working with a sequence that's purely MIDI or a so-called, warped or tempo syncable audio or loops, there's a pretty easy little method to create more natural feeling tempo changes and general tempo map and still have everything on a grid. So here's how I like to do it. Basically, the process is just to record a simplified performance of the composition freely, so not to a click, and then use that performance as a guide for your tempo map. And I have a couple tips about how to do this that I found really useful over the years. Today, I'm going to be working in a kitschy, authentic Soundware retro style, but I use this process all the time for all kinds of styles, from rock, soul, singer, songwriter, and especially for big orchestral scores that, they really benefit from having a more fluid tempo feel. So I've made a short composition, and it changes tempo after the intro, and it currently sounds like a really abrupt change. Although the information is musically sort of connected, the tempo isn't feeling natural. So let's have a listen to this track. Okay, so yeah, there's this intro that's at 200 BPM, and then it sort of goes to that bossa feel at 120. And in this bar here, we kind of want it to retard, to slow down, and then actually kind of hang on this note. I have like a little pause. At least that's how, I was sort of hearing it, but I had a click up. This is the classic thing. I had a click up, I was writing, and then, I just leave it. Right? I'm lazy. I got a deadline. But it's not really that hard to give this a little finesse that's going to make it feel so much more natural. So basically, the step-by-step process is that you're going to use a count off into a tempo that you've already defined. So I know I wanted this to start at 200. So I'm going to count off to that downbeat. But then I'm going to have the metronome turn off and play freely after I've been counted in. And then I'm going to play through this little transition in my normal human rhythmic feel, and we're going to transfer that to the MIDI map. Now, you don't have to play every element of the song. You just have to play enough that you're playing all the key indicators of the tempo changes. So it could be as simple as pulling up a bass, playing your melody. If your melody is hitting all the marks and they're rhythmically sort of discernible, that's fine. In my case, I'm feeling like in this intro, the bass is the main thing, but then I got this upper part. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull one sound up and play this naturally. So in cases like that, what I do is I just grab a regular old piano. It doesn't matter what. This is like the stock contact piano, and I'm going to use that as the thing I'm going to use to input my tempo. And I'm going to solo it because I'm going to be playing freely. I don't want to hear those other things. And what I'm going to do is just kind of play the song. So I may have some flubs here. Let's give it a shot. Actually, we don't even really need the second half. Maybe we'll come back to that if we have time. So let me listen. Okay, that's good enough for our purposes. So it really is quite different from what I had before. If you look at the grid lines here, what we're going to do is the first thing we have to do is change the time base of the track. Pro Tools and Cubase definitely have this. I don't know about every DAW, but see this time base in Pro Tools. It's called ticks, and in Cubase, I can't remember what they call them, but here we call it samples. So that means like these MIDI events are now going to be sort of chronological. They're no longer relative to the MIDI tempo. They're relative to the time of the samples in the DAW. So if I change the tempo up here now, you'll see that all these other MIDI notes are going to move, but these ones will not. Say I made this 60, they'll all stretch out, but the blue ones didn't, because they're not being affected. They're not relative to ticks anymore. Okay, so that's the key to this. In Cubase, it shows a clock for chronological and I think it's got a little eighth note icon if you're on ticks mode. So what you're going to do is identify where all these beats are in your natural timing. So like this is a downbeat of measure 2. So I'm going to use the Pro Tools identify bar beat marker and set this to measure 2 beat 1. And I'll set this to measure 3 beat 1. And this is beat 3. I think, yeah, and this should be measure 4 beat 1. And you'll see that these are all moving to follow it now. And then this has to go away, that's old. And we're going to make this measure 5. So that's a long pause. Okay, let me just listen to this. And now we can mute the piano. And now this needs to go back to 120. Now, before I do that, I just want to show you, you can do this without using that bar beat function that I just used in Pro Tools if your DAW doesn't have that. All you need to do is, again, make sure you're still on samples mode and use the grid lines as visual reference. So you find your sort of target note. This is the note I'm going to look at now. Grab this bar, because this is the length of the bar we need to change, and we're going to put that so that that line is right on this note. And we could even do that here if we wanted. We could really make it live feeling. This is the other. This is going to be our next target note. This is the next one, and so on. This is like going to be really long. Really slow down a lot. Whoopsie. That was just I accidentally zoomed this ruler in because I'm pulling it down so much. This is pretty boring to watch, isn't it? Now, I think I maybe went a little bit overboard on this pause. I'll show you how we'll deal with that. I'm just zoomed in too much here in Pro Tools. Okay, so this is our new map. So now the cool thing is, now that we have the musical rhythmic information from this performance transferred to this map, now we can edit it normally and use that as our sort of baseline instead of that non-fluid version we had before. But I'm going to put my reference, if I had actually used one of these instrument tracks to perform this function, I would really want to make sure I put it back to ticks, because now that I've got it the way I like, I want it to move. I don't want it to stay put. So for example, I think this pause was a little bit overboard. So instead of it going down to 78 here, let's make it maybe like 96. It always seems to be 96. still a little too long. So we'll just pull that up, and now everything is moving. These all seemed it's a little exaggerated. Now, what I would normally do also after doing this is just, take some of these ugly numbers and make them a little more human readable. In fact, maybe I'll also put this back to the original 200, and maybe this will be, maybe I had a reason for my scoring that had to start at 200, and I'll make this just 183 on the nose, and this is 180, so it's like it's gradually stepping down. This would have been, let's round it up to 168. We'll make this just 145. And we'll put this to, let's just call it 110. Okay. So that's like a little bit more easy to work with and wouldn't look so crazy on a chart. If you needed to hand it to an orchestra to perform, they'd be able to, they wouldn't see the tempo to 4 decimal places. Like that bar, this really could use a bit of a retard here at the end. So let's just do it a second time. So we'll, I'm just gonna make this a bit smaller. Back to samples mode. We're gonna solo this, count off on, click off. It's really just gonna be playing one chord, but let me just, I'll put it in record, of course. So let's see how that would go. Okay, so we have, this note we know is right. This is actually looking pretty right too, but then it starts to slow down. Well, why don't let's just put it exactly the way it is. So that's 3. This is going to be beat 4. And this will be beat 1 of measure 12, like right on beat 12, measure 1. And now, what did I play? 2, 3. This kind of feels like it's at the slowed down tempo that wants to be 1, 2, 3, 4 off on the downbeat. Ending a note is a very musical thing that performers do, but we kind of don't do it so well in a DAW. Okay, so that should have transferred it to the other instruments. Some of these samples would need to be adjusted because they are static. They're not tempo-based. So that's the process. Now, if you're a Pro Tools user, hang around for a sec. I want to show you something. See how the tempo map is now blue? It was green before. When you use that identify bar beat marker, which is key command I, and I for identify, it's up here in the event menu, identify beat. It converts all of your tempo points to locked hit points. So if you can move them and it will maintain the position of the hit point relative to real time. I hope this makes sense. So say this bar 4, identify beat bar 4 is like something that's happening in a movie that you're scoring, and it's happening at exactly 1 hour and 4 seconds in time code, and you want that to stay the same, but you want this one to be a little bit later. When you drag it, it's keeping all the other points where they are. It's only moving the one we're moving. So the tempo here is getting faster to compensate, and this one's getting slower. Okay? But once I make one manual change, this is going to go back to green. It's not going to stay. If I simplify this down to 120, if I put like a tempo mark here of 121, now they're all back to green. Now it's not going to do that anymore. If I move this, it's going to the changes will cascade down instead of being locked to their position. So that's something to be aware of. It's very easy to have it in identify mode and then sort of absentmindedly input a new tempo and forget that cascade is going to start happening. So that's why I do that cleanup process where I go and put them all on, back to this green unanchored mode, so that because it's the typical way that Pro Tools defaults to, and that way I'm always I'm less likely to cause a problem down the line. So that's the gist. If you have any questions about it, please hit me up in the comments. This is a very powerful feature, and it's really good to be aware of, especially when you combine audio file elements with this way to either tie those audio files to musical reference or to chronological time reference. Oh, and just one other aside, I didn't mention, but if you had an audio file in here, let me just create an audio track just to show you in Pro Tools, and you have it set to the elastic properties to polyphonic, or any one of these elastic modes actually, you can still do this. You can switch between ticks and samples, and it will stretch or compress the audio to follow these things. So you can even do it, you can't be too drastic with it, but you can do it with live recordings. I've had to do that in the past, and as long as it's not being stretched too far in either way, it can be pretty useful. So yeah, like I said, be aware of this and look for it in Cubase on the track. It looks sort of like in this area where all the little buttons are. Okay, thanks for watching, and again, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll be happy to do my best to try and answer. Okay, talk to you later.